You're an American who's now in charge of a football club, despite possessing very little knowledge of the game. You got a question in there, Trent?
I got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Offside, you turn it!
I am 0 for 2 in that sentence.
This man has a plan.
Plan.
Plan. No, not plan.
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 We are here with the great Bill Lawrence, co-creator of Ted Lasso. I'm Tom O'Neill with Gold Derby. First of all, to say congratulations. The show has already been renewed for its 3rd season just a few months after it debuted on Apple TV Plus. This is amazing. How did you do that?
Yeah, it's not how it always works, Tom. We're lucky, man. To know that we get to kind of finish what we started already is a gift for the writing staff, and especially Jason Sudeikis, who kind of had the story he was telling mapped out even beforehand.
Well, that's where I'd like you to go with this discussion. You've done a lot of popular shows, and we're talking Spin City, and we're talking Scrubs, and many others. But this show came from a different source, and a different inspiration and situation. It has an unusual backstory, doesn't it? Tell us that.
It certainly does. The Jason Sudeikis, he created the character Ted Lasso as a comedic promotional tool for the Premier League a while back. He and Joe Kelly and Brendan Hunt came up with this character. And it certainly isn't like a commercial type situation where, I read somewhere someone's like, oh, it's like the Geico Cavemen became a TV show. I'm like, it's not. He wasn't selling insurance. He was making. Ted Lasso was an American football coach hired to coach a Premier League soccer team, but more importantly, it's kind of promotional films, short comedy films, that were supposed to generate hopefully interest on the American front and watching Premier League games. And then an amazing thing happened. I talked to Jason. We were talking about doing a show, and he said, I'm still more recognized in Europe and the UK as Ted Lasso than for any movie or SNL or anything else I've ever done. So we started talking about the idea of making that character a show.
And then the character takes a turn from those promotional commercials to the actual show, doesn't he? He's more silly now. How would you define the difference?
Well, look, those commercials, and I'm not the only comedy writer that had seen them and thought they were really funny. And people can go check them out. They were funny, but it was completely different. They were loud. They were very sketch based. Ted was kind of a bombastic, yelly American coach. When Jason and I started talking about working together, he said, what do you think of making Ted Lasso a show? And I watched, those films again. I'd already seen them, and I thought they were so funny, but I didn't know, how they would work as a show. It seemed like it'd be very sketchy and, week to week loud and lots of jokes. And he said, no, one of the reasons he wanted to work with me was he had this idea of really kind of putting some emotional undercurrent and some pathos, behind the world, that Ted has a real emotional life, and he's, in a damaged marriage, and the other characters as well have some kind of real emotional depth on their journeys. And I said, oh, that's kind of interesting, because we started talking about it being, a TV streaming version of a sports movie. And the other thing was Jason, was very committed early on to having Ted Lasso be dumb like a fox. And what I mean is, he can be clueless, in those commercials, but he needs to be a little sharper. And as he says in our show, he's used to being underestimated, at least in this new world. So it's kind of brave of Jason to say, not only do I want to take this thing that people know, but totally redefine it.
And in the case of that duality, part of the problem, in a way, for the viewer is you want to empathize with the main character, but he's often an idiot. Or is he? Is he Columbo, like the detective, who is just playing stupid to catch the murderer? Or is he Gomer Pyle? Is he just an idiot who happens to have great, profound insights into a world around him? And so,
yeah, look, it's a great question. But look, I don't think any of us think Ted's an idiot. I think that we probably think he is more emotionally astute than not only any other character on the show, but most people in real life. And obviously, we did go to the well a little bit of, especially in the pilot and early episode of Ted being, he's hired to fail, but he's coming into a sport that he doesn't know much about. And the key for us creatively was there's a difference between like the best version and the worst version of a kind of a American fish out of water. And the best version is ignorant but curious. Ignorance with curiosity. I don't know the rules to the game. I don't know what it's like over here. I don't know your language the same way, but I'm willing to learn, is different than ignorant with arrogance. Like, oh, I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to be the best coach ever, or I'm going to know more about this than anybody else ever. And what we're building towards in the show is, in the 7th episode, Jason wrote a monologue for Ted Lasso that I can talk about how much I liked it because it's not being self-aggrandizing. But he's talking to another character while he plays darts and said, my whole life people have underestimated me. And it's our kind of, map to telling people this guy's a lot shrewder than you think. And, and he's a survivor, and he won a championship in America for a small college thing. And everywhere he goes, people seem to kind of line up into his way of thinking eventually, because it's not manipulative. And it's, about a dude that's kind of pure of character and spirit.
Do you think there could ever be a day, and you may not have even decided this question yet, let's say the show runs for many years, and you have a decision to make. Can Ted actually, or should he, ideally ever become the winning season's coach? Or is this really a show about somebody who could win key strategic moments, but it's a show about all of us, people who have to deal with being losers a large part of the day and lose battles and somehow cope, and then have that quality he has of unflappable optimism in the face of whatever hardship is thrown at him?
Well, look, there's a two-sided answer to that, Tom. Answer number one is Ted Lasso, the character, takes great time to repeat often in the first season that I don't really care about wins and losses. That's not how I judge,
Success,
the job I'm
right.
doing here with these young men. It's not how I judge success. And he means it. And by the same token, I've given you a hint in that, what was really interesting for me coming to the streaming world with Jason is I think in the world of network TV that I lived in for a long time, you do 9,000 episodes of a show, and then when it's time to end, you hopefully nail the dismount in a way that your half your fan base isn't mad at you and doesn't think that you ended the show wrong or upset them. In the streaming world, Jason, and by extension the writing staff and the rest of us, we came with the beginning, middle, and end of this show already done. And we know the story that we're going to tell, and the hint is that Jason and I view this as our version of a sports movie. And what we mean by that, is when we were pitching the show, we were lucky enough that Apple bought it, and no one else did, and
well, tell us that. We have a theme to our.
I promise I'll circle back. I promise, Tom. So the end is when people at streaming sites are like, oh, is this going to be too niche because it's about sports? The thing that we said is we're embracing the sports movie of it. And I've never paid money to watch a boxing match on TV, but I've seen every Rocky movie. You know what I mean? My wife's not a baseball fan. She's seen Bull Durham and can recite lines from it. And so along with it being a sports movie comes certain tropes that we're trying to put our own spin on. But I suspect one way or the other, when we say that there's an end to this show, that means there's an end for Ted's run with this team, be it winning it all or having to move on. But that's a story that we're ready to tell. Now I'll circle back to your other one, man. Go ahead.
We actually have a theme to this conversation today that we were given, which is script to screen. So you and Jason come up with this idea and you develop it and you bring in whatever cohorts that you would rely on to flesh this out. How does it get from there to the screen? What is that process? Is it just throwing it in the face of every network? Is it making the rounds and knocking on every door, or are emailing it to everyone, or is every case different?
Well, this one was very different for me, Tom, because look, this one started with me chasing Jason Sudeikis because I wanted him to be in a show that I had written by myself, and he liked it but was not interested in it. And then he said, "Hey, how about this idea and show that Joe Kelly, Brendan Hunt, and I have kind of mapped out? Do you think this would ever work as a TV show?" And the gift was that, you know, he had a real idea who the characters were, and they had done a whole lot of legwork on this thing. And the added to it was they're really open to my input and to my contributions and to me becoming part of the team. But the first step was Jason and I had to go around town with this idea and try to sell it. And the tricky part, it's very common to go try and sell a show based on IP, intellectual property, being a book, an article, a previous movie, a cool video, or in this case, short comedy promotional films that had been filmed years ago. But what was very tough, and I had never tried before, is we showed everybody in these meetings, like, hey, here's these old Ted Lasso videos. Now we want to do a show based on this guy that's nothing like these videos. And that, I think, was kind of a hard sell, because we're saying, hey, here's something that's very specific and funny, and we want you to buy something starring that character, but nobody else from the show is really in that, and it's not going to be like those things tonally. And so it was kind of a tough mountain to climb, because I really enjoyed it because I've been doing this for a long time, but it was trying to make people understand what we were really trying to do, is build kind of a rich layered world, and and have not only Ted Lasso, but every major character, man and woman, have their own kind of emotional journey in the series. And Apple understood, and Zach and Jamie over there and the rest of their team kind of embraced it. And they were even on board when, what I think is very interesting for a streaming show, the first scene of the pilot, if you're making what is usually a star vehicle, you would say, oh, it's the Jason Sudeikis show. The first scene of the pilot is probably getting to know Ted Lasso, and it's not. The first scene of the pilot is a very long scene with the female lead. Do you know what I mean? And getting to know her and her character. So we were just lucky to have creative partners that kind of bought into what we were doing from the start. And in a cool way, once they climbed on board, they ordered the show and let us run with it, and have been kind of a really great supportive partners since that moment.
And then how long does the running take? When they say go, how long does it take to go?
So like when we sold the idea, let's eliminate the amount of time that you sit around waiting for all the business people on every side, company I work for, Warner Brothers and Apple, to figure out budgets and salaries and how much everything's going to cost and when. Once that all went down, we handed in a pilot script, and once they said we went and worked on a pilot script, got it into those guys, and once they read it, they approved us to start going for the whole series. And from selling the idea to turning in the pilot script was probably 2 or 3 months. And then the second they said, oh, we like it, let's get going, then we had, because it's Apple and it's a streaming show and the series was picked up, we were concurrently, as a writing staff, writing all 10 episodes while trying to cast it, staff it, as far as, because it's all shot in the UK, hire directors, pick locations, go back and forth, and do all that stuff. And it was a different time, Tom. You know, it was a time that people could travel and see other human beings face to face. You know, so
Right.
even though it was crazy, we did it fast. So once we handed in the pilot script, I feel like we're just about 4 months away from starting production on the whole season.
And then shooting the whole production season took how long? Take us behind the scenes to, like, you start when in the morning and you shoot how long during the day? Or do you do it like
Sure,
do you do it like Clint Eastwood, one take and you move on? Or do you do it like Marty Scorsese and do 75 takes of every scene?
you know what? It's I think TV production by nature is a little bit more of a snowball rolling down a hill. But if you don't make your days, it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And the tricky thing was learning, the ways of production in the UK. For instance, well, first off, the great thing, so many skilled artisans there behind the camera, hair, makeup, boom, they have great production world over there and super talented people. That said, in America, we often do overtime. Like if if you're trying to finish 5 days and 5 pages of material on a 12-hour day, and you've got another hour and a half at the end of the day to go, in America, you'll say, "Hey, everybody will get overtime. Let's finish today's work." That's not something they do in UK production. When their 12-hour day is over, I think it's great because they protect their lives, and when their day is over, their day is over. But that means you have to find this kind of fine line between making your days and rushing and making sure that you take the time to get the scenes right, especially when you're talking about a comedy where there are going to be moments that Jason and some of these other great comics and comedians, try different lines and try different takes on material. And the other thing that was kind of new for me was I love London, but we were there shooting in the cold, cold, cold weather. When people are supposed to be outside and bouncing around. That is a country that I think they have 2 or 3 weeks of like springtime and summer, and the rest is just generally gray, rainy, and cold. It was rough, man. Man, what a fun experience. But yeah, so we're doing 5 12-hour days, and then we had to package around certain things like shooting at a real Premier League stadium and some of the kind of football that we needed to make look real. So it was like shooting a 10-episode movie.
Do you have a favorite character you like to write? Mine would be Hannah. I mean, Rebecca. She steals the show, flip-flopping between devious, evil Darth Vader, to quote her herself, which she denies the character is, but to being also a really kind of loving, nurturing person.
I got to tell you the gift on this show, and please know I'm not patting my own back, I'm patting theirs, is I think we've all been on TV shows or on projects where you had clear favorites and that you had to actually go, hey, the danger here is that I want to write so much for these men and women that these other people are going to fall through the cracks. And on this show, I could wax on and on about whether it's Nick Mohammed, who plays Nate, and and all these people in the cast are they're like our versions of Renaissance performers. Nick was simultaneously playing Nate in our show. He's a very strong comedian while he was running his own show, which he created called Intelligence with David Schwimmer. Brett Goldstein, who plays the old veteran Roy, the grizzled kind of me, he concurrently had the first movie that he ever wrote with Catherine Tate, was being made there while he was running the other show he created, Soulmates, which was on AMC and Amazon, and writing on our show and playing Roy. Do you know what I mean? And Hannah Waddingham is so talented, and I'd known her from musical theater and never seen her play somebody with this kind of much edge, and
edge is a good word for it.
And still have like an undercurrent of, you didn't hate her, you felt empathy for her. Juno Temple, the same way. There's but not only the principal cast, Phil Dunster but start from a fact that Jason Sudeikis is super talented. Not only is it, not many people know he's a writer first on SNL before he's a performer, as a writer, but also as a lead, did not mind taking the spotlight or sharing the spotlight, depending on what we needed. But man, it was an embarrassment of riches. Even looking at that team, the Christopher Fernandez or Tahib Jamal, the guys that play Sam, the Nigerian player, or Danny Rojas, these young men and women came from everywhere to us, and the world keeps getting bigger and bigger. They're all so fun to write with. It's an impossible to answer question, Tom, and I get in trouble if I answer it.
But you know what? I have some admiration as a journalist, a writer of a different kind than yourself, but I loved something about Hannah near the end of the show, and I think it happens late in the show, like maybe even like the third to the end episode, where she goes to Higgins's house and she apologizes and she actually says, "I have been a fucking bitch." And what's interesting is not only does she do her confession, and she might have given her character's nature this devious plot to just get him back into the office and get him back doing grunt work, but she doesn't flip after that. The series plays out where she doesn't go back to a devious, diabolical side to her. What I'm pointing to here is that this show has a heart to it, and a genuine heart to it that isn't often appreciated among TV critics. It's considered sentimental if you do that. You take chances as a writer and often can be crucified for it if it's not cynical and insult-driven. So this show takes a lot of creative chances that in some cases are old-fashioned, but obviously work.
Oh, thank you. Look, the first thing is, a comedy writer, I never want to be disdainful towards what we might call snarky, cynical comedy. Most comedy writers, we love that world. I told someone the other day, I could watch the show Veep over and over. That each character is more reprehensible than the other. They come up with new ways to curse and be horrible to each other. And man, I just drink it up. So that show is incredible. There's shows like that. They just have to be really well done to work. And I think the tightrope of a show like this that you just described is it depends on the performers really, and kind of just all the ducks lining up in a row and being really lucky. Is that if you try to be inherently optimistic and try to put a world out there that is kind and hopeful and has tremendous heart and sentiment to it, the danger is that you fall into treacle, or into schmaltz. And so I think what helped us is, having Jason police us, but always trying to be authentic, in the ways that people might actually behave, and the other thing that helped us, we talked about a little bit already, Tom, is having these tropes that people think they know what they expect, and that you can then tweak it a little bit. An example, since we're talking about Hannah, is fun for me. Social media, what it gives you nowadays, and sometimes I hate it, sometimes I love it, is immediate feedback. And what was fascinating was, when people first met Hannah in the pilot, they were like, "Oh, it's that villainous woman that just wants to destroy the team because, she's a bitch." And that's what we wanted people to think. And what was really interesting, when you have 10 episodes instead of the hour and a half of a sports movie, you get to explore, hey, how did she get there? Right. And we had it mapped out of a journey of a woman who had truly been mistreated as a spouse. Do you know what I mean? In a way that I think would harden any of us. And the trick of hopefully getting audience members to not only understand how she got there, but empathize with her, and then want her journey that you just talked about back, to the light, as it were, to, I think people were hopeful that she would make it, and happy when she did, felt earned, and I think when things slide into sentiment or schmaltz, they aren't earned. You're just trying to make everybody hug at the end. And that's what we're trying really hard to avoid.
Well, we've reached the end of our discussion here, so I want to end with a joke, and I want to give it to you in the form of a question. Since you're one of the great producers of our time, I want to ask you if you know how Fred Allen once answered the following question. When the great comedian was asked, "What do producers produce?" Do you know what he said?
No, but now I'm gonna have it made into a tattoo and put it somewhere, not somewhere in my body you can see, but somewhere that just you and I'll know it's there. Tom, what do you say?
Relatives. What do producers produce? Relatives. Anyway, thank you so much, Bill. Congratulations on the immediate success of this show and the long-term vision of to run with you and take this show of inspiration, a show and this kind of optimism that we need right now, probably more than ever.
Oh, hey, Tom, thank you. Not only me, but I can speak for everybody. We're so grateful, A, that anybody uses their time to watch this. And B, I can honestly say, I think it didn't end up this way out of a plan. We all needed a little hope and optimism in our lives, even those of us working on it. So this has been a gift. And anytime I get the chance, I try to say thank you to everybody. So I really appreciate it to you, sir, and to anybody else that, gave us a few hours of their time.
Okay. Now go back to work and get some more great writing done. Thank you.
I'm ready, man. I look tired, right? All right.
You sure have. Thanks.